Good morning and good evening and good afternoon to all of you joining us today. We will get started with this virtual session on Ida Hobbit, International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, and Biphobia in just another minute as we wait for our anticipated 300 plus friends from around the world to join. So hang tight, we will be getting going in just about a minute. Okay, thank you all so much for waiting. We anticipate that more people will be dropping in as the session goes on, which is perfectly fine. I see that we already have over 120 people from around the world joining us. So my name is Dina Fidas, and I'm our Managing Director as well as Chief Program and Partnerships Officer here at Out and Equal. Every May 17th, those of us in the LGBTQ and allied community honor what has become known as International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, and Biphobia. Interestingly, it happens just a few weeks before Pride and can range from being a rather solemn event, honoring lives lost and the well-being of the LGBTQ community that has suffered from discrimination, harassment, bias, and more, to a more dimensional celebratory day in which we as a community claim our space. And so without further ado, we've assembled some extraordinary advocates and friends from around the world to discuss what this year's Ida Hobbit theme, Breaking the Silence, means to them. This is intended to be a semi-formal, if not informal, conversation amongst friends, and we welcome all of you who have dialed in to type any questions or comments you have in the chat function of this Zoom. So without further ado, I'll ask our friends and panelists to go ahead and turn on your cameras. We are joined today by Ananda Puchta, Chloe Davies, Curtis Baker, Ram Sinha, Salomon Cunha Lima, and CV Viverito, as well as Karina Hendren from the Out and Equal team. So welcome all of you. I'm so excited to have this conversation today, and I will go ahead and ask that each of you give us just a brief introduction of who you are, what brought you here today. Let's go ahead and start with Chloe.
Hi, Dina, and everyone, thank you. It's such a pleasure to be with you today. My name is Chloe Davies. I identify as a Black bisexual woman. I'm here in London in the UK, and my day job, I'm head of PR and partnerships for my Chi work. And then in my gay job, as it were, I am strategic officer for UK Black Pride and the community lead for the London Queer Fashion Show here in London. So that's me.
Thank you, Chloe. And my apologies, as I don't believe I gave my pronouns verbally. They're on the screen. My pronouns are she and her. And Chloe, do you mind just repeating your pronouns?
Yeah, my pronouns are she, her.
Thank you. And let's go now to our friend Curtis Baker in Shanghai.
Good evening, everyone, or good morning, or good afternoon. So it depends on where you are. So my name's Curtis. My pronouns are he, him. So I'm with the Walt Disney Company here in China. My day job, I'm doing foreign recruitment with our Greater China team, and also lead our Disney Pride employee resource groups here in Greater China. And then also another hat I wear is a part of the Shanghai Pride executive team here in Shanghai. So I identify as a gay male here in Shanghai. I live with my partner, Jason, who is Chinese. Glad to see everyone.
Thanks, Curtis. And Ram.
Hi everyone, I am Ram. I'm the co-founder of Pride Circle. My pronouns are he, him. Yeah, my day job is about transforming workplaces for LGBT inclusion in India. For instance, we organize India's first ever LGBT job fair, and we're looking at a really amazing challenge for the coming weeks, which I'll talk about later. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much, Ram. Welcome. Ananda.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ananda. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a lesbian from Brazil. So good morning to the ones that are here in South America and in the Americas, actually. And good evening to Curtis and afternoon to those who are in between us. My day job actually right now is quality assurance assistance for ExxonMobil, but my gay job has been for longest like 5-6 years, advocating through LGBTQ equality here in Brazil as lawyer, as a panelist, as a speaker. Either way, all the ways we can help our community.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ananda. And Salamo.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Dina. First of all, thank you so much for this invitation to you and Not Equal. I'm Salomon Cunha Lima. My pronouns are he, him. Making my audio description, I'm a gay white man. In the US, I would be seen as Latino. I have curly hair and a mustache, and I'm wearing a black shirt with many words proud all over it. I work for TOTUS, which is a Brazilian tech company. I'm the diversity and inclusion leader at this company, and I'm also, this is my day and gay job, but also I have my only gay job, which is I was the founder and I'm the leader of Games Diversity, which is an organization here in Brazil, and I'm based in São Paulo, Brazil. So glad to be with you.
Thank you so much, Salamo. So let's start. May the 17th this year, the theme is Breaking the Silence. And I think I'll ask Ananda if you could go first and share, what does that mean to you to break the silence in the context of LGBTQ advocacy?
Well, first of all, breaking silence requires lots of bravery and courage to speak up. And it can be hard in the beginning because I wouldn't see myself like 10 years ago doing what I do today because I didn't have at the time the strength I do now to speak up. So it requires self-knowledge and a really introspective process of being strong enough, having a safe space and having a safe community to talk to and to express yourself and then be able to go forward and speak up. So it's a life-changing process, and for me it was part of my trajectory as a person, as a professional. And yeah, it's hard, but at the end it feels really good because you can express your pride and yourself.
Thank you so much. Does anybody want to jump in, or I can call on us since there are a few of us? I'll go ahead and pick Chloe. I think Chloe's got a light bulb. Chloe has a light bulb above her head right now. As usual, is glowing.
Oh, shush. I think that it is that, like you said, Ananda, sometimes I think when I think about myself and not necessarily having visible role models as I grew up who looked like me, and not feeling like this was actually going to be my goal in life, and kind of falling into it very much more so when I had my first son. And I thought about what did the world look like for him, and thinking of some of the struggles that I've gone through, especially being, a Black bisexual woman, and so the many challenges and the identities that I carry with me. And so breaking that silence is more about being visible and standing in my truth and sharing what the experiences of myself and people who look like me, and having the opportunity to do that not only in my day job, but also in my volunteer roles of kind of bringing the experiences of more marginalized people other than myself and everyone within the community, and breaking the silence together. You know, some people are still afraid to speak. And so part of breaking the silence is being their voice.
Thank you so much, Chloe. Ram or Salama, do you want to jump in?
Sure. I think people from the LGBT community since childhood are always made to feel that they're wrong, that they don't fit in, what they feel, what they believe is wrong. And somewhere they start self-censoring themselves, check the mannerism of how you walk, how you talk, what you share, whom you talk to. And that takes away the self-confidence, the individuality, all of that is kind of shut it down in a box. I think breaking the silence is breaking that mold, what people expect you to be, and sharing your voice, believing that you deserve a seat on the table, and actually believing that what you are is correct and what you are is right.
I
Yeah.
love that. Laying claims to space. Salama.
Yeah, I totally agree. When I started thinking about this discussion and what does silence mean, I looked into Google and I saw silence means complete absence of sound. And at that time, I imagined like a desert. It's definitely a silent place in the middle of nowhere, nobody over there. So the wind comes and starts moving the sand. And what is impressive about that? But that the single movement of some sand is able to create some sound. So I was thinking that the strange to break the silence is in the emitter. And the wind helped a lot, but the emitter was the cause of the effect called sound. So looking at this metaphor, any one of us LGBTQ people, we are like the sand, and the wind could be the organizations. And the point is, do I feel confident to break the silence? Do I feel safe to break the silence? And yeah, when I think about confidence, I'm looking about myself and how can each one of us have self-confidence and self-worth to be able to break it. But also when I think about safe, I'm looking at the environment. So trying to see that there are many people like you, like me. That's what Chloe said, right? When I look at the organizations and I see the lack of role models, especially for us LGBTQ people, including all the intersectionalities. It's very important to have them for people to be inspiring. So yeah, I think there is much things to be done, and in terms of organizations and also within us to make this silence to be broken.
Thank you so much, Salama. And Curtis.
I think to me, breaking the silence means making the words and the letters LGBTQ tangible and real by making it a real person, a real story, a real experience. And it's sharing that tangible story. So then they can no longer say that I don't know someone who is, but now it can be, I know you and I like you and I love you and I appreciate you and I value and I respect you. And now I know more of you, and I think that's what it is. It's about that authentic tangibleness of who we are.
Thank you so much, Curtis. We're getting some lively conversation happening in the chat box. Everything from one person sharing about their gender transition and the notion of visibility being key here. Notions of authenticity, notions of having, personal role models and speaking to various identities. I'm seeing notes on here about intersex identity, and also a well-heard comment that we haven't yet made very salient just yet on this call discussions about being genderqueer, trans, non-binary. And so I know some around this panel have experiences to share there. So thank you all. I also heard, particularly from Chloe and from some on this panel, that part of breaking the silence is the ability to show up and to be very self-aware that you may be one of a few in even in an LGBTQ space who quote unquote looks like you. And I offer that particularly, you know, for someone who's not considered a person of color here, we need to break the silence on intra-community racism and classism and ableism. And that I think sometimes in LGBTQ spaces, these conversations can get glossed over, and that it's about dismantling the notion that we choose or that privilege trumps lived experience. So I wonder if anybody wants to speak about breaking the silence through that lens on matters of gender, race, class, parenting, and more.
I guess I'll speak. It was, you know, we all talked about this when we were having this conversation, about having this conversation. And I guess, you know, I already said that I'm a parent. So when I look at, you know, myself, I'm a mental health survivor. And especially kind of when we think about, you know, the realities of the time that we're all in, wherever we are around the world, that, you know, our struggles as LGBTQ plus people, but then the other identities that you carry, what's the impact in all of that? And I think that's the part, you know, my very good friend says, you know, what's normal? We want to usualize our existence. And so it is about making sure that in our spaces, we share as many different examples of what our existence looks like you mentioned, Curtis, so that we understand and can kind of respect each other's identities, even if it's not something that we were ever introduced to, because it's not what we see when we look outside the window or when we go outside. But understand that no one's struggle is harder or easier than somebody else's. You know, Lady Phil says, my struggle is your struggle and your struggle is my struggle. And it is so true. You know, we will all battle things at so many different times. It's about just being genuinely kind to each other and understanding what those barriers may be and how we could all possibly use whatever passing privilege we may have, whether that is, you know, through work or, you know, through the volunteer roles that we have, whether that be by class or by race or by gender, that we actually show genuine care and consideration. And I've seen a lot in the chat, everyone talking about allyship, that we share that true allyship with each other. Yeah.
Thank you. We're also getting a lot of great comments that I think are speaking to matters of representation. So particularly our friends from Brazil, you're getting lots of praise and pride. And I also want to acknowledge that in these spaces, whether it's Ida Hobbit or Pride, a virtual engagement, there's a very natural impulse to want to see yourself or to want to feel that you are being represented. And so to the degree to which our circles here do that for some, I'm very glad. And I also want to, with humility, recognize that this relatively small panel isn't necessarily speaking to all the intersectional identities of those of you who have joined us today. And I want to thank you for hanging in there with us, for sharing your stories in the chat box, and I will look forward to even more dialogue moving forward. I'm also seeing some interesting chat about what it means that breaking the silence can alleviate, you know, stress. It can feel liberating to come out as bi, can feel liberating to come out at work, and to break through stigma and fear. How much of that resonates across the panel? Ram, I notice you're off mute, so I'm hoping it means you might have some thoughts.
Yeah, it's I think 100% that we all have had our journey of living with that fear. What if people get to know? What if people got to know at work? Will I be fired? What if my parents got to know? Will I get thrown out of house? I think we all have either lived through or know friends who have lived through such experiences. So living your truth and breaking that silence is absolutely empowering, but it definitely comes with its own cost, because sometimes coming out doesn't go really well. In that sense, I also compile stories of coming out from India. It's called 101 Coming Out Stories.in. And there's such diverse stories and that intersectionality which we were just talking about, that are passing privileges. Like even in LGBT circles, if we see that only gay men are dominating the conversation, or even in trans communities, if only trans women are dominating the conversation, it's important that we always pass the mic. That what we have faced as lived reality of discrimination, we don't pass it on to the next set of people. What we consciously fought and struggled to break through, we consciously create a space that other people find the same space. Like especially in today's context, when there are so many more new terms and identities, which we may, even people from the LGBT community may not understand, it's important to still pass on the mic to understand what the lived reality means, and that new experience or new terminology of sexual orientation or gender identity or expression means.
Thank you. In the spirit of passing the mic, Salamo, Ananda, Curtis, do you want to jump in?
I actually want to comment on something. Go ahead, Ananda.
Go ahead, Curtis.
Anika. I was going to say that I commented on someone just made a note here, saying that, speaking about an ally, and saying that they feel nervous about sometimes saying the wrong thing. And I think that part right there acknowledges, that you're aware. And that's a big thing. Jennifer Brown talks about going from unaware to aware, and that's a big thing, just of that being aware. And for me personally, I'm an open book. I'm like, you can ask me anything. And trust me, people have asked me some crazy questions. And I think that you find those people that you trust and that you love, and to say, and it's okay. I find it's okay to say, I'm sorry, what are your pronouns? And that shows a sign of respect. And that shows that stuff that you are aware, and that you're aware enough that you're like saying, you know what, I respect you enough as a person that I want to make sure that you even feel valued. And so I'm saying that. So don't, we're all on our journey. We're all constantly learning. And so the fact that you even acknowledge that is a big step. So keep going. I just had to point that out because that was really good. Ananda, go ahead. Honey.
Yeah, it was. When Dina made the question, I was like, is Chloe's gonna come and speak up? Because, she has a really inspiring voice. And when I first saw her in Out and Equal last year, I was thinking about my trajectory and the role models I had and the role models that we can be for the next generation. And I just realized that I didn't had any role model. And for me as a lesbian woman and a Black woman in working class in Brazil, it's really difficult to see that breaking silence sometimes it's hard, but it becomes easier when you have a bunch of good people around you, people that respect you, that make you feel comfortable, and give you the strength to go there and break all the silence that someone next to you want to say something and you have the strength to do it. So it comes with the responsibility to see that our actions reflect in so many other lives and so many other experiences that can be impacted. And so this acknowledgement, as you said, Curtis, as leaders, as allies, as friends, as family, it's really important, so we can make a really inclusive society for our community. And bringing all of this with the intersectionalities that we have, being from where we are from, having the skin color that we have, the trajectories and the complexity of being in this world. So it's really nice to have and hear inspiring stories as you all here that share with me, and the people that are commenting in the chat as well. So this experience and exchanging stories, realness stories, I think for me is the best part of what we do in our jobs, making possible that this exists.
Thank you so much, Ananda. And I actually wanted to welcome someone who certainly everybody around this panel knows, but is my really extraordinary colleague, CV Viverito, who's been hiding behind the ampersand since it's the morning here, and I assume they are just starting their coffee. But CV agreed to come back on camera. I think one of the launching points, CV, as our Associate Director of Out and Equals Global Program, to riff on this conversation about some advice and some strategies for people who are less familiar with our community. The question that I know Curtis picked up on, but on a personal note, I don't think I've met another advocate who is able to be so personable and gracious with allies or those who are very new to the subjects of LGBTQ, of non-binary and trans identities. So now that I've thoroughly embarrassed you, CV, I'll pass you the mic.
Great. No, thank you. And hey, I didn't expect to be popping in on this webinar, but I'm very happy to. So yeah, I've seen a couple of comments. We've all seen a couple of comments come in. One person had mentioned having trans and non-binary voices represented on this panel. I'm here, I'm in the background, I understand, but now I'm here visible. I identify as non-binary. My pronouns are they, them. And I do trust everyone on all my wonderful friends here to be amazing allies and advocates when it comes to speaking to those issues, and I sincerely appreciate that. But to someone, I think Maggie wrote in, feeling nervous about saying the wrong thing, in particular sometimes when it comes to pronouns. And I just want to thank you personally, Maggie, and everyone else who might be in Maggie's position for just being on this webinar and taking the opportunity, using your time to log in and self-educate and learn and be a part of our community, and we welcome you. I think that is such a huge step, right? If we have the access to information and we're taking the initiative to learn about folks who are different from us, that's amazing. And we really thank you for that. And it takes the burden off of the folks who hold those identities to always be the educators in that space, which as Dina mentioned, I'm tend to be more than happy to do, but that's not the case with everybody. It can get a little bit exhausting. So I will say to you that if you're feeling uncomfortable, and this goes within the theme of breaking the silence, right? I'd say the first step is trying to figure out what you can on your own. And I know in this day and age, sometimes it feels like there's either too much information and you can't find what's right, or there's no information. So I know it can be really frustrating, but the folks on this webinar are different organizations. Resources are available there, and that could be a good first place to start. And once you kind of get past that, you feel like you have a foundation and you probably still have some questions, I think it is okay to ask people in a safe space, maybe not in such a public forum. And if it's in particular a trusted friend who you have that trust with, finding the time to say, hey, I want to have a conversation with you about X. Now might not be the time, but if and when you're ready to feel like maybe you can help me find some of these answers, let me know. So that gives the person the time to prepare themselves to have that conversation with you, and it'll probably be a really great conversation. I personally always appreciate people respectfully asking me, questions more about gender identity and pronouns, and from there, they are then able to teach others, right? So it's not me, then you become the voice for me in other situations. And seeing things like that happen inspires me more to do the same for my friends who I don't share their identities, but I can be that voice and that advocate in situations when they're not there and when they are there. So Yeah, I think allies are really important in breaking the silence. Actually, I've been saying allies, but I want to use Chloe's term. Is it accomplice? Or what is it, Chloe?
It's co-disruptor.
Co-disruptor. That's right. Better than an ally. Yeah.
I hope you don't mind if I just jump in before Salma, but it is like you said that, you know, someone, I've seen a couple of mentions in the chats about tokenism and, you know, not being that single voice when sometimes you are the only voice in the space. And so, like you said, sometimes that gets exhausting, you know, and people saying, you know, I don't actually know where to go and where to ask. Like, this is actually, being on this call today, being on this webinar is the first experience that I've had of really kind of understanding some of the issues that you've all spoken about. And so that doesn't normally come to my place. And that also comes back to breaking the silence. You know, Ram, you said, you know, in India, the reality is that sometimes being us, like being our whole, true, authentic self, does take bravery, but it's also understanding that this might be, the barriers might be cultural, they might be, you know, through religion, it might be for, you know, the government structure that you have where you're at. So actually being bold and being brave to be that role model in the first place, you have to understand what those barriers to that silence is. And I think sometimes it's also sharing those where we can, you know, when we have the spaces, and I know that we all do that for each other and for other parts of the community. So when you are listening to a webinar like this and you're hearing experiences that just hearing LGBTQ or just seeing a pride flag you might never understand, that is part and parcel of the learning and really helping us as a community to grow, because you'll take that knowledge and you'll take it back to the other people that you meet and share, you know, and then that really does become, our struggles then do become your struggles too.
Thank you so much, Chloe.
Can I quickly add something to this?
Yes, please, Ram.
So, a lot of people do feel like they're walking around eggshells because they don't know how to have a conversation. So in fear that they might offend the person, they would rather not have a conversation. I would rather say, if you come from a space of where your intent is to learn and to build a bridge, it's okay to make mistakes and people will correct you till you're open to feedback. It should not be like you do not engage because you don't know, because that we will never know. It's other thing is, like, from an ally perspective, it's important to respect it. Even if you don't understand it, you may not understand my identity and don't get why certain people identify a certain way or what it means. You don't need to understand it completely. You just need to respect the person.
Thank you so much, Ram. And I just want to gently guide us, because we're getting a lot of requests to really tap into the expertise on this panel. And if we can move maybe to some strategies. So I'm going to list off a few of the topics that have come up, and feel free to grab them as they speak to you. One is some very specific guidance about breaking the silence at work when it comes to pronouns, specifically non-binary they, them pronouns. I want to hear from the panel, and I also want to let everybody know, as I put in the chat, that we have a brand new resource coming out in about 2.5 weeks on that very subject. And it includes references to evolved language in Spanish and Portuguese. So we're very excited about that, but I want to hear some panelists' thoughts on that. A second broader strategy, you know, many of us are home if we are able to work from home, which comes with its own privileges. How do we break the silence and forge connection in this virtual environment? And I think more generally, we have a really fantastic question about breaking the silence on an institutional level. And I want to read the full comment here that says, how do we address the ways that we are systematically silenced through police brutality, lack of access to jobs, lack of adequate representation, etc.? So the 3 topics to grab, one would be on pronoun and non-binary inclusion in the workplace. One is broadly about how do we forge connection and break the silence in a virtual environment. And a third is how can we institutionally break the silence?
I'm gonna have fun and go right in the Oreo. I'm gonna go right in the middle.
Great.
With the third time about that.
The bold.
You know, talking about that. So for me, I'm here in Shanghai, China. So we've actually been working home. I've been working from home since January 30th. And I'm still working from home as of today. And so it has created some interesting, how do you stay connected? And I'm a people person. If you've done your strategy, your people strengths, people finders, yeah, that's the word. I'm a woo, so my number one is woo, so I need people. But one thing that we found that's actually a silver lining, and our group talked about this earlier, is that with this online space, it can actually create those who are a little not yet comfortable with showing up physically, but they can show up virtually. And I know Ram talked about this too, about how it can be a digital, a virtual safety, to where I can log in just like some have logged in here with just a name or just a number, or and so you can still attend, you can still be present without being fully present. So you can be here and be comfortable or as comfortable as you want to be. And so I know in our office here in Shanghai, sometimes we'll do pride talks, and we're doing in a big open space purposefully so that everyone can see what's going on. And I remember one time there was one person who kept going to the water cooler like 5 or 6 times. And I'm like, this person's like super thirsty, or are they just not comfortable yet, showing up, and committing themselves to this, to the talk, and so I think that's one of the great things about staying connected, is that sometimes it's just checking in, saying, how are you doing? But it's okay to sometimes also just to click in and just be be at those bystanders, because it's allowing them to come to the table still at their comfortable, and it's step by step by step, kind of tiptoe in to their safe space.
I'd like to add.
Sorry, go ahead, Samar.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I would just say that this trust network is very important at this time, independently of who is part of your network. But it's necessary right now also to be careful about that, right? I would say that it's important to find a safe environment, and definitely see what are these environments, and who is the right person to talk. I mean, the right and freedom to come and go right now is a little bit tested. In some places we have lockdowns, so I think it's very important to evaluate when, where, and to whom you are thinking to break this silence, because safety comes first, and I mean the integrity of the human being. So I think this is very important to add. You definitely need to find this place, but just be careful, please, to the person you're talking to, and being secure and safe before any other thing.
Yeah, so I just want to say that in a world where a lot of the part of the world is in a lockdown, where we miss that warm hug from our dear friends, it's important that we maintain physical distance, but we build that social connection, where we still build that touch point and that emotional connection, where we have a safe space. All the safe spaces we had in our physical world, how do we replicate them in our digital space? It could be a very simple sharing session where 5 people are just hanging out and talking, 5 people watching a movie together. All of that really builds relationship and builds our community together. In that context, I quickly want to also share this brilliant program we are coming up together. It's called 21 Days of Ally Challenge. And we are really honored to partner with Out and Equal for this. It's a global challenge. It's a series of micro challenges. Each of these can be completed virtually from your own home. You don't need to step out. And it's about building a global community of people, learning about LGBT community, learning about the laws and the challenges people face, but also figuring out how can we really speak out as allies? How can we really engage and support? So I really appreciate all of you to check that out. Thanks.
Thank you, Ram, and we're equally proud, and we will include that in our follow-up notification to all the participants today.
I think, Dina, when you mentioned about so trans inclusion and kind of at an institutional level, and I think when we talk about pronouns, and very much from a day job perspective, is really giving that education around what it means for that particular part of the community, but also, you know, when you're speaking to, as I do quite a lot, to HR or D&I leaders, it's really making sure that that starts from a policy and procedure perspective, because it's all well and good talking about, you know, things that are in practice, but actually if the impact to people who identify in that way means that that hasn't already been catered for or thought about as, you know, what are your employee benefits, what is your healthcare, like what is the experience of someone who may identify in that way, forget, you know, the L, the G and the B, but more importantly the T, and across all of those balances, what does that inclusion really look like, and making sure it starts there. Because if it isn't there, then it doesn't matter how much training I might going and give you on pronouns and what that means. That person who identifies as non-binary, trans, queer, they're going to have that impact on a day-to-day perspective. And so that's where it really needs to start at the root. And kind of just to keep preempting that, but also having the benefit, you know, like we are all sharing best practice with friends, being able to connect with other businesses who are doing it really well or have a resource, or who are a vocal leader for particular parts of the community, and just saying, hey, email intro, you should speak to this person, they actually have a really good policy, and there might be some parts that need to be adapted, and I'm sure that they'd be able to support you. I think, you know, we've all as people in business really had to think about how we collaborate together in this time in a way that the lines are blurred and they have disappeared, and that people are speaking to each other so much more across business, whereas before you're like, oh no, I can't speak to them because they're, you know, the rival firm. Like actually now we're all collectively sharing best practice. But I also think that in doing that and in having these connections, it also allows us to hold people to more of an account, and to be able to say, you know, you asked me this and I'm following up, or actually how did that go, you know, and really keeping that, you know, someone, and I'm going off topic slightly because someone put a comment, you know, we are an LGBT community that isn't necessarily one happy community, and that there are struggles within many of the different identities, and, you know, how do we bring that? And I know that you touched on that earlier, Dina, and that is the reality of where we are. We're not all happy-go-lucky, and we can do collectively more for each other. It's actually recognizing where those issues are, sometimes being, you know, those brave people in the chat that have said, look, these are some of the struggles in the community, so it's great that we're talking about this part, but this is my reality of what I'm thinking about this, and how can we help, and understanding that, you know, collectively we are just 9 here on this chat, but we are 9 who are collectively trying to break down those barriers and those struggles, and bringing that information and sharing that back and forth. That's literally the start. Like, we need to know, we need to be able to share and to tell and to help, and then be able to actually do something about it.
Thank you so much, Chloe. In our remaining 15 minutes, there are 2 threads that are really jumping out at me in the chat box. And they are related, but certainly distinct. One, we've got some really interesting conversation happening about this notion of allyship, speaking for people who, quote unquote, don't have a voice, versus speaking with people. And I'll be the first to offer, as someone who does occupy a fair amount of privilege, to encourage others to ask yourself, is it that a person doesn't have a voice, or is it that the person has not been given the mic or the platform and is not being listened to? Because that's quite different. And so I offer something, maybe that's a touch provocative for some, maybe it's a no-brainer for others, but I offer that. And I really appreciate the rich conversation happening around this, the tension of allyship and speaking for people. And I welcome the panelists. And then the second thread is we're seeing some really practical questions around what can companies do? What can managers do? What can colleagues do to support LGBTQ inclusion broadly and breaking the silence? So let me dip out now on mute and allow you brilliant panelists to jump into whichever of those excite you the most.
So I want to comment on your first question, because lots of people ask me, oh, how can I be an ally? How can I speak? Where can I go and where can I stop? and I think that's the doubt for many of them. And going forward, like for all intersectionalities, we all need to be aware that our experiences are ours, and every person feels different, every person lives different from us, and we need to acknowledge that we can help each other, but we also need to acknowledge the time that we need to step up and, you know, give the mic to the ones that actually need to speak. And I think allyship comes forward like that. On a daily basis, I'm currently in a new job, and I had this experience with D&I and advocacy for LGBTQ people. And my manager, I was like hoping that I was being able to be here with you, and she just came to me and said, like, go ahead, it's part of who you are, you need to do that, because, you know, I'm not going to just let you out of it because of 1 hour of work. So don't relate, like, this is allyship, you know. She knows who I am and my sex orientation, the work, the gay job that I have with all the community, and she spoke up for me, but then she gave me the opportunity to be here and speak forward. So I think allyship goes like that. Even though if we're a white person defending anti-racism, even though if you are a straight person defending transgender rights, you know, you have to know your privileges and where you step in, and also know the time to give the mic and say, no, now is the time for me to let this person say and speak up. And it comes with life, you know, everybody's learning all the time. So it is not a recipe matter.
Well, I'd like to talk about the second question you've said, Dina, in terms of how can companies can right now make much noise as possible, right? And in my view, it's a hard task for companies right now. I mean, uh, we all know that priorities are being different right now, especially for the leaders. Companies are trying to survive. Many companies are in this difficult time. But I totally agree, and I think we have to keep poking the leadership. We have to poke everyone who have the power, who has the power to make this noise to take place. I think it's a role of each one of us to make this institutional break and improve this noise, because it's very, very necessary nowadays, especially right now. I would also add that many friends of mine, many of my friends, they are just, when we just say goodbye to each other, they say to me, keep safe and sane. And this is a point for me right now. I think mental health, I mean, keeping safe and sane, especially sane right now, is very important. So in my opinion, companies should invest in mental health for their workers, and also share with the workers channels in which they can report violations for them to keep sane and to keep living and breaking everyday silence. I mean, in a normal day without the pandemic, I have to break the silence every day. When I in my way to the work, in many places where I go, I have to break the silence all the time. How can I be sane and with mental and psychology security to do that? So I think the company can be part of the trust network as the company works or follows this way.
I'd like to add to that, like, while this current pandemic has really hit everyone, but some people are hit harder. And it's important that organizations don't cut back on D&I budgets, don't cut back on Pride celebrations, because it's important that we still stand with our employees, those who are particularly marginalized and maybe at a larger risk of mental health or any other issues. So it's important that we build that conversation and continue building that engagement. And also, when you look at relief and support to the external society, how do you also ensure that we're doing something for NGOs and organizations that are working with the LGBT community, because very few people are working for that community? So how do we also ensure that we go out and ensure that there are methods and places and available resources for people who might really be starving today? So I think it's everything we do as an organization, be it Pride Month celebration, be it digital Pride March, or whatever else it is, from a donation to everything else, let's look to include LGBT people and all marginalized communities in that sense. The other quick point I want to say, like, while we are in a digital workplace today, the benefit is that it's a closer community. We are sitting at different places in the world and we are still able to connect and talk today. How do we really use this and leverage this as an opportunity to build that conversation within the organization and still continue to build that culture of inclusion in our digital workplaces?
And I want to touch on that first one. It's kind of I see everything kind of beautifully. It's like a beautiful dance here, our conversations here, and with the questions, and so being a white male American living in China, in my office when I first came out, I guess you said, to the office, or when I first asked the question about Pride, I was the only gay guy. I was the only gay person. I was the only LGBT. And like, he's one of them. And it's anything that had to do with D&I, anything that had to do with Pride, anything that had to do with LGBT. They go, oh yeah, Curtis could do it, and it became, the token. So I hear that tokenness, but sometimes it's also, being comfortable in yourself to open the door and to bring in those others behind you. And what's really interesting is our Pride, our Disney Pride Employee Resource Group, our ERG, our BERG, we call it Disney, became a lot of allies, and those allies slowly shifted to become where they became comfortable to identifying themselves as L, as G, as B. We're still hoping for more of the alphabet. But it's sometimes you do have to use that privilege, to open that door. And, when you talk about what can a manager do, a manager can help open that door. As a manager, as an executive, as a C-suite member, can say, you know what, right now, I don't think this is the right thing. We need to shift this way. Or we're looking around the table and saying, where's our LGBT representation? Or where's our Asian representation? Or where's our people of color representation? And it's using that voice that you have as an executive, as a manager, to say, where is that representation? Not just at the table, but in your policies and in those best practices that you're doing. So it's sometimes great to use that privilege, whether it be of your ethnicity, of your gender, of your identity, or be it your title, or your status, that you can use that to come in and to open that door for other people, or to say, you know what, this is a safe place, and if you're a manager, wear a rainbow flag. It doesn't have to say ally on it. Let people talk, let people guess.
I think it's very much, when I think about, what can businesses do, and it's like you said, Salma, we're LGBT 365 days of the year. So, if you are committed to your LGBT members of staff, if you have an internal ERG, then you should not stop talking to all the different ERG groups that you have to ask, how can we help our staff during this time? We say that Pride isn't just for the month of June, that actually it is looking at that representation. So you have to, when you have that passing privilege, continue to hold people to account. I did a panel last week and I said, are your organizations, is Pride cancelled? And every single panelist said no. There would be a riot in our workplace if our managers said that actually there's no more budget for Pride. So it's the ERGs that have actually been saying, this is where you really need to focus. This is what we would like to do, and are bringing the ideas of how, knowing that they can't march in prides anymore, or that they can't have that physical space, how they can then bring it to a virtual space. And then the next challenge is that they're making sure that there are multiple voices when they're bringing that. And it's not just that we're going to have a bingo night, but actually they're going to have some really dynamic dialogue. But I also think that falls into what you said, Salma, about staying safe and sane. And it's that when we look at well-being, we are almost demanding that organizations really think about well-being in a way that they never did before, and the impact of what it means to work from home. But understanding that specifically if you are someone who identifies as LGBTQ, that this entire experience, even if you've never been closeted, feels like you are back in a closet, that you might never have ever existed, and the many different barriers that you might be working from home, but maybe the safe space isn't a safe space where you work from. So how can our jobs help support that in terms of being able to have someone to speak to, or providing different elements, if there is a well-being session that your business can do, and even as us as LGBT people and LGBT leaders within your organization, suggesting to your businesses, I really think that this is a space, so that way, sometimes we also have to be those people that help provide those answers and be happy and willing to do that. And like Stevie mentioned, sometimes that gets exhausting, but we recognize that that's also the responsibility that we are all more than happy to do in the positions that we're in. And so if people can feel like they can approach us and they can ask, but also sometimes knowing that we need to be that physical, verbal voice that says, actually, this is the first step I think you should take. And sometimes lending that voice and lending that knowledge to people, because ever more so, we're all afraid. And we're even more afraid to stop and ask things that actually we might have done just in conversation before. And so sometimes we just need to be that helping hand that really says to someone, look, I know you want to ask, or I think you might be struggling in how to do this. This is a really good suggestion that actually my friends and I, or within the network, we really thought that you should do. And I think that way, that's how we're all going to help propel each other to get through this.
Thank you so much, Chloe. That was so beautifully stated. We're coming up amazingly at just about the hour, which is when we promised we would wrap up. I have to say, probably more than any of the recent engagements, the energy here and I think the desire to speak together for another hour is kind of radiating off the screen. I don't know if you have the extra time, but it may be that we reschedule another conversation and this becomes a standing point of connection. I guess I'll offer just briefly in closing, which is one, this is not goodbye, this is until soon, because I know we will all stay in touch, and we will stay in touch with the hundreds of people who joined today, or 150 who joined today. I also want to say that so much that has been touched on, we have programs and resources, and I know many of you do as well, that we are going to follow up with. This month is, as I think we noted, Mental Health Awareness Month. And in just a few days, Out and Equal is releasing a special resource focused on intersectionality, LGBTQ+ identity, and mental health. And a key component of this sign behind me, the business of belonging, part of belonging means to be able to be psychologically safe in the workplace. And I think to some of the points that were raised today, not just on mental health, but if you are in a position to be receiving someone's first message or words on a subject, whether it's grief, whether it's their identity, whether it's their rage and their fear about police brutality, I would offer to treat that as an act of trust. And there's a covenant between the person who breaks the silence and the person who receives these words. And that covenant of trust means it's okay to comfort someone. It's okay to simply listen. And it's also okay if you find yourself in a position to be breaking the silence, for your voice to shake or for tears to come to your eyes. The cultures of belonging that we are trying to build allow for that safety net beneath us in these moments of risk and courage and vulnerability. So thank you all so much. I realize some of you are going to probably put on your pajamas and go to bed after this call. Others are going to have their second cup of coffee. It's an absolute privilege to know all of you. Thank you to all of you who dialed in. We will stay in touch, and I'll offer we have 1 minute left if there are any final words that any of you want to offer. please feel free to jump in.
I would just say keep safe, keep sane, keep resilient, and keep strong. We belong to the place we want to be, and who you are is more important, is the most important thing right now. So keep strong.
Yeah, and to go along with that, oh, go ahead, Ananda.
No, CV, please.
Okay, you next. Just to go along with that, Salomao, in the theme of breaking the silence, the more you break the silence, the more resistance you're going to face. So take care of yourselves, take the time you need in between breaking of the silence, and reach out to us, all of us on this call, and to your friends in your community for support.
Sure. Yeah, I'm really grateful for this and for this moment, and to be able to speak with you all, long friends, in this particular time. As Salomon said, keep sane. We are living in a time that everything is questioned, everything inside and outside us is questioned. So keep resilient as well, but take care of yourself. You are your safe space before every other space. So yeah, I'm just grateful to be here, grateful to Aud and Nicole and all the friends that are jumped into the call. Yeah, that's it. So see you later.
I just say stay connected. Breaking the silence is more fun doing it together.
Absolutely. And it is okay to not be okay. So take the time for yourselves, have a breath, have a breather, have a cup of coffee and a biscuit, and then come back and be better. But we are all here and we are thinking about you all, and we love you all around the world. So stay safe.
Thank you.
Break
so
your
much.
silence.
Thank you.
Share your story. Share your story over and over and over again, because you never know who's listening. And if you need someone to share your story for the first time, you've got 9 of us here that's willing to listen. So from Shanghai, Neiman.
Yeah, absolutely. Hugs, hearts, and light, all of you. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll stay in touch. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.